This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Well, the Phillies lose another game because they're just a total disaster right now. Game 2 starting right now as I'm talking to you here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Another bullpen game because Phillies don't have enough pitching depth to actually do anything. So I'll keep you updated on this miserable team as the hour progresses. Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. We got some Eagles, NFL to talk. Also, NBA playoffs. Dave McMenamin, ESPN NBA reporter, is going to join us coming up at 6:20. We got a lot to get into because tonight on 97.3 ESPN, Lakers Nuggets Game 3 coverage begins at 8:30. Tomorrow, Celtics and Heat coverage begins at 8 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. As the NBA playoffs keep moving along, we're going to get to an NBA champion in the next couple weeks. And what's going on with the Sixers? Tyronn Lue is currently a candidate, according to reports, for the Sixers head coaching job. What would he bring to the 76ers? Well, Dave will get into that coming up at 6:20. And speaking of, Billy Donovan, according to Woj, has just agreed to become the next head coach of Chicago Bulls. So Billy Donovan out of the running for the Sixers job. A little news there right off the top of the show here. So that makes even Tyronn Lue's candidacy even more in the spotlight for the Sixers. So we'll get into all of that coming up with Dave at 6:20. Dave McMenamin, of course, also the author of the book Return to the King, about LeBron James's return to Cleveland and that whole era of LeBron returning to Cleveland and then winning a championship. He's got a lot of great insights on exactly who Tyronn Lue is and some of the behind the scenes that went on with the 76ers, or the Cleveland Cavaliers during that era. And we'll talk about, is Tyronn Lue the right candidate for the Sixers? So that's coming up about 17 minutes from now. PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. I don't know if any of you are sad or disappointed that Billy Donovan isn't the Philadelphia 76ers head coach, that he chose to go to Chicago. I feel like Chicago makes a lot of sense for him. Donovan doesn't feel like the guy who picks up and takes you to a championship at this point as an NBA coach. He feels more like the guy who's going to develop your young players to get them past that development stage to contendership. He's got a little... I think Billy Donovan was always closer to Brett Brown than he was, let's say Steve Kerr. That was the example that guys like Darrell Reynolds and Mark Jackson have brought up on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody, that the Sixers are looking for their Steve Kerr. And I never felt that Billy Donovan fit that criteria. So good for Chicago, but also kind of a inadvertent good for Philadelphia as well. 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Before we get to anything else, I did want to get to the Eagles today because after the loss on Sunday, we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about Carson Wentz and the Eagles' offense. Well, in the spotlight today was Jim Schwartz and the Eagles' defense. Jim Schwartz spoke to the media this morning, and I thought he had some very candid words to say about his defense and about who's responsible for what we saw on Sunday. Because we know historically this is a matchup between the Eagles and the Rams that have gone the Eagles' way in the past. And for the Eagles defense to give up so many points, and not just so many points, but 3 touchdowns, for goodness sake, to the likes of Tyler Higbee, was just embarrassing. Well, Jim Schwartz was very upfront about where the blame falls for that game on Sunday.
When too many of those things happen, I don't blame the players. I blame myself. You have one missed assignment, or, you have one tough matchup, or a guy physically gives up the play. A lot of times you can't lose confidence in your game plan, and you can't blame yourself for things like that. But when you get experienced players that start making those kind of mistakes, then you're like, okay, we're on the wrong track here. And like I said, I was a step behind switching to plan B, and I should have been quicker on the switch.
That was Jim Schwartz. He says it's his fault for the lack of the execution out there. For when he said when there's that many mistakes made, it falls on him. And I found that very interesting because in the previous 2 games, the Eagles were allowing 29 points per game to the Rams in 2017 and 2018 before allowing 37 yesterday. The Rams only had 1 turnover. Previously, the Eagles had gotten 2.5 turnovers per game with Jim Schwartz's defense against Sean McVay. Well, obviously, they exposed them. And I thought it was very interesting how Jim Schwartz kept placing the blame on himself. Take a listen.
It's the age-old thing. Guys try to make a play, and when they try to make a play, you end up giving a play, and they were trying to shore up some areas. And as a result, we were being exposed in other areas. So I'm very confident in our guys. I'm very confident in our players. We just need to get back to our formula. I need to put them in better positions, and we need to keep improving over the course of the year.
Now, there is a little Andy Reid in there. I got to do a better job. I got to put the guys in a better position to be successful. You know, we hear a little bit of that in Schwartz's voice, but it's not like Schwartz says this a lot. It's not like Andy Reid felt like he said this almost every single game. You don't hear Schwartz come out speaking like this very often. And I thought it was very interesting that he's talking about how, listen, we are a team that does things a certain way and we couldn't do it this past week. And I thought that, listen, if he is going to be that specific and placing it on him, maybe he's taking some of the blame, but maybe he's also just, that's really what he believes and what he thinks. And if he really believes that his game planning and what he did put this team in that bad of a situation, then maybe there is something to be said for that. Maybe there's something to be said for the reality that Jim Schwartz just had a bad day at the office, right? Maybe there is something to be said for that Jim Schwartz put this team in a position that they just couldn't be successful. And you go back over the years with the Eagles defense and you realize that for as much as there's a segment of the fan base that doesn't like Schwartz because they all worship at the statue of Buddy Ryan and the Eagles defense from the late 80s, that the only good defense that's ever lived and the only thing that came close was the Eagles defense under Jim Johnson. Well, the problem with the defenses like that is that when you blitz too much, you leave the back end of your defense vulnerable. And Schwartz's whole scheme, his whole system, his whole philosophy on defense is built around not leaving the back end of your defense completely exposed. His theory is, I'm going to get pressure with my front, and I don't need to bring a bunch of extra blitzers because if my guys are good enough up front, if the 4 or 5 guys who are coming on every down are good enough, they'll get the pressure needed to force the other team, and we'll bend, but we won't break. We'll give up yards, but we won't give up points. So that's his philosophy. That's how he views playing defense. But despite what people think, year in and year out, Jim Schwartz's defenses before this year have been among the best in the league and not allowing points. Now, these past 2 games, the first game was partly the offense's fault. The offense put them in horrible positions with short fields, their backs against the wall, and it was hard for them to compensate for that. But there's also something to be said for the fact that in the Rams game, they didn't make adjustments. They didn't make the adjustment quick enough to handle it. And I thought that this answer that Jim Schwartz was asked about, he was asked, how can you avoid this? How can you get around this? And he talks about what concerns him the most is about the response, right? When something happens to you, right? If you get knocked down, if you have a bad game, right? The Eagles historically have actually played very well after some of their most embarrassing losses. For example, before I get to the Jim Schwartz audio, when the Eagles lost to the Saints and the Dolphins in 2018, after that horrible loss to the Saints, they allowed only 19 points per game the rest of the year in the postseason. After the Dolphins' embarrassing loss, the Eagles' defense allowed just 17.4 points per game the rest of 2019 regular season and postseason. When Carson Wentz went down with his season-ending injury in 2017, the Eagles' defense was a huge part of that run to the Super Bowl. If you take the regular season and the postseason combined, the Eagles' defense allowed 15.8 points per game during that stretch from after the Rams game when Carson Wentz tore up his knee to the Super Bowl. By the way, that number includes Super Bowl. If they would have given up less points in the Super Bowl, that number could have been historic in terms of points per game allowed. So every time this team faces adversity, they've bounced back. Well, now Schwartz says that's his biggest concern this year. Take a listen.
The area that I'm more on high alert for is our response to adversity. Typically in the past, we've been a team that can weather through a lot of different things. We can set our jaws and make a play. A turnover happens. We get out and get a stop. We can change the momentum of the game with a takeaway or, a sack or something like that. And I think that even though, we're struggling in a lot of those other areas, the area I'd really like to see the most improvement is that ability to set our jaws and go out there, regardless of the situation, regardless of anything, go out there and get those things stopped because we're failing in that regard right now.
And for the uninitiated, the concept of setting a jaw is a fight term where a boxer or an MMA fighter might get hit by a big shot and get knocked down or maybe stumbled. And the old trainer theory is you reset your jaw so if you get hit again, it doesn't buzz you like it just did with maybe that right hook or the left uppercut or whatever the shot may be. So Schwartz is saying that his biggest concern is they got to respond. They got to bounce back. And I can't disagree with him at all. I think he's 100% right in that. The biggest concern for this team moving forward is you just got punched in the face again and again and again by that Rams offense. Now moving on the rest of the year, this is not going to be the last high-level offense you face. You still got to face some really good teams down the road. That Cardinals team you got to face near the end of the year, they're looking really good right now. You got to face teams like the Steelers, who look really good right now. This Bengals team is no pushover. They scored 30 points last week. And Schwartz is right. How this team responds is going to make or break this team this season. There's a stretch where you have the Steelers and the Ravens back to back. Another stretch where you're going to have to deal with the Seahawks and the Packers and the Saints and the Cardinals 4 games in a row. So Schwartz is 100% right. How they respond to the adversity is a very legitimate concern because the examples I gave you earlier, the Saints loss, the Dolphins loss, the Rams loss in 2017, 18, and 19. After all of those games, you didn't have 14 games left on your schedule. No. You had about 5 or 6 regular season games left on your schedule. You didn't have 80% of your schedule still ahead of you. So in the past, when the Eagles defense got really just destroyed and the team had a horrible game or adversity, as he calls it, there was a short window of time to turn around. We got to turn it around immediately. Now you got to turn it around, and you got a lot of games ahead of you. Interesting comments from the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation, 609-403-0973. Coming up next, we'll change up gears a little bit. We'll talk about the NBA playoffs. Lakers, Nuggets tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 8:30. What's going on with the Lakers-Nuggets series? We'll get it from somebody who's down there in the NBA bubble on the NBA playoffs. Also, the news that came out, Adam Silver talked to Bob Costas. And what did Bob Costas and him talk about? Next NBA season. Adam Silver says it's looking a lot more like January 2021 for the NBA season. What does that mean? We'll get into all that and more, as well as Tyronn Lue, a candidate for the Sixers job. Who is Tyronn Lue? Get that, all that, and more coming up next here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you, leading you up to Lakers-Nuggets Game 3. You can hear all the action tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 8:30. And a man who covers the Lakers and the NBA is Dave McMenamin. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
Doing good. And, you're the perfect person to talk to on a day like this because with the Lakers playing tonight and with so much going on in the NBA with news, I got to know from you, though, to start before we get to the Lakers game, what is your perspective on this talk about how the NBA season might start now in January? It seems like Adam Silver is kind of preparing the world for that possibility.
Yeah, January or even later, Josh. I mean, certainly, I don't think Adam wants to move the goalposts too far down the road. It's the hope of having things occur sooner rather than later. But, to me, the important thing about that interview here with Bob Costas from CNN was he mentioned that the league and the league owners are looking into the possibility of rapid testing. And, basically, they could probably restart in December, right, if they wanted to go back to a bubble. But they recognize not only the cost of putting together a bubble or multiple bubbles, but also on top of that, the strife of being away from your family if you're down here. And then you also have the idea that you don't get to recoup any revenue from having fans there. Well, if there are rapid testing technologies available in early 2021, then you could be talking about having games played with fans in the seats. And obviously that'll generate, revenue that they would otherwise lose.
Is there any encouragement you believe seeing how certain other sports are able to have some fans, limited capacity, maybe kind of paving the way? Because we know the NBA, they keep their eye on everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows that it can be done. I don't think we are far enough along and have seen what's happened after, what's going to happen after 21,000 fans or however many it was go to that game between the Falcons and Cowboys. We don't know if there's going to be an outbreak. We're only a couple days removed from it. So it could potentially be encouraging, of course. But I think we have to see how it goes for these other sports.
Let's get to the game tonight. Again, you can hear all the action here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 8:30 tonight. Lakers, Nuggets, Game 3. And it feels like to me, Dave, the biggest thing that stood out to me is that when I'm watching these games, the first thing in my mind is, man, the Lakers have a lot of guys they can throw at Nikola Jokic. I mean, they got Howard, they got McGee, even Davis, and even LeBron can maybe handle Nikola for a couple of plays.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a talented player. And, one thing I'll give a lot of credit to Frank Vogel and his defense in these playoffs so far, they don't stick with a steady diet of one type of look. You saw it in the Rockets series against the best scorer the league has in James Harden. They were doing traps. They were doing doubles. They were changing the timing of the traps, sometimes with 20 seconds on the shot clock, sometimes with 14, sometimes with 10. And obviously that disrupted the Houston Rockets offense. And you're seeing the same thing with the personnel that they throw on Jokic. To me, maybe they overthought things. They went away from Dwight Howard in the second half, and that's kind of when the Nuggets got going. I'd like to see even more Howard against Jokic. He spoke before the series began that he really relishes the opportunity against him. He likes playing against him because it gives him a challenge to, kind of figure out all the offensive skills that Jokic has. I think you'll see more of that. But it's not like he's going to be completely subdued. He is a fantastic player. And when it was money time in game 2, I think he scored the last 12 points for Denver, put them up with a jump hook over Anthony Davis with 20 seconds left to go in the game. He is good enough to lead them to a victory tonight. If the Lakers, don't continue to try to flummox him with different looks.
Dave McMenamin joining me here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you follow her at Mick10 on Twitter. Dave, one of the other big things I've noticed in these playoffs with the Lakers is the impact of Rondo on this team. Talk about the differences for the Lakers before they had Rondo and now with him on this lineup.
Yeah, I mean, they missed him the entire first round, and he got hurt the second day they were down here in the bubble, the second practice. He discovered a fractured right thumb, and then he tried to come back. He had some back spasms, but really since game 2 of the Houston series onward, he has been such a difference maker. He has chemistry with certain guys on this roster, Markieff Morris in particular. It seems like, Morris and Rondo can read one another, and Morris's three-point shooting has really found a rhythm since he shared lineups with Rondo. And, just simple things like, I guess it seems simple, but it's a really big deal. The end of game 2, he wasn't in the lineup, and he goes up to Frank Vogel and says, "Hey, do you want me to be the guy inbounding the ball?" And Frank's like, "Yeah, let's do it." Well, unless Rondo's a 14-year veteran with a championship under his belt, he's probably not going to go up to the head coach and basically sub himself into the game. But because he is Rondo, he did that, and then he was able to find a secondary option on the play that was called. They were going to go to LeBron James. Of course they are. That's winning time. That's what he does. But, the way Denver played LeBron in that possession, there was no movement. LeBron would have been catching it, flat-footed. Instead, Rondo could see Anthony Davis springing out to the left wing, threw him a perfect pocket bounce pass because he couldn't throw it over the top of Jokic, and Davis was able to catch it and hit it in stride. And so, it's all those little things that Rondo does. One of the smartest players I've ever been around. And, the plus-minus numbers weren't all that great for him during the regular season, but, the myth of playoff Rondo is a real thing. When the games matter, his IQ really stands out.
Now, Rondo's former team is in the Eastern Conference Finals, which folks can hear tomorrow night here on 97.3 ESPN. Heat Celtics, and I feel like no matter who comes out of that series, it's going to be an incredible NBA Finals. But I want to get your perspective on how that series has played out and your perspective on how those two teams have kind of jockeyed back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think Boston could look at themselves and say we should be up 3-0, right, rather than down 2-1. They lost a tough one in overtime in game 1. And certainly game 2, they had their chances and they had a big lead at one point. And, but on the flip side, you say Eric Spoelstra is maybe the best coach in the league, multi-time champion, and has been able to rework that roster several times over and make them competitive since he took over the helm for Pat Riley. You have Jimmy Butler. Obviously, your listeners know all about him, having seen him play for the Sixers. He's a guy who can really, operate from different areas on the court offensively, and then his competitiveness and his commitment to the defensive end, to me, is contagious. Bam Adebayo is a guy who's coming into his own in this league, and then they have shooters around those guys. So both teams, belong in the Eastern Conference Finals. This is not a fluky matchup. And, I picked the Celtics in 7 just because I felt like they might just had a few extra bodies there. But, quite frankly, I didn't anticipate that, a guy like Duncan Robinson would play as well as he is so far in the conference finals. I thought they'd be able to neutralize him. They tried to neutralize him in game 3. All of a sudden, Robinson gets hot in the fourth quarter, and then it becomes like a 5 or 6 point game. And so It's going to be a battle of attrition. I imagine it go down the wire, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Boston tied this thing up and we're 2-2 heading into Game 5.
ESPN NBA reporter Dave McMenamin joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Again, Lakers, Nuggets tonight at 8:30. Heat versus Celtics tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. All the coverage right here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave is also the co-author of the book, Return of the King, about LeBron's return to Cleveland, him and Brian Windhorst. By the way, the book is on sale right now on Amazon, so you better jump on that right now. I just noticed that, Dave. And one of the reasons why I bring up the book is because you guys document in that book a lot about Ty Lue. And he is one of the finalists right now, according to reports, for the Sixers job. What would a Ty Lue guy, and as a coach and as a former player, bring to the 76ers?
I mean, to me, he is one of the most authentic people I've ever been around. I covered the league now for about 15 years, and he's been in the league in some form or fashion for close to 25 years. And there's a reason why people stick around like that. An extreme knowledge of the game, but beyond that, a personal touch where he's able to relate to everyone he's around, whether it be the front office, whether it be the last guy on the bench, whether it be the superstar, whether it be the media, whether it be the ownership. He just has that way about him. And to me, you couldn't do any better if you're the Philadelphia 76ers giving him that job. I mean, you say, okay, Joel Embiid, I want to sit down with you. I want to talk to you about the days I played with Shaquille O'Neal. And here's the sets that Phil Jackson ran for us to get Shaquille O'Neal to have an MVP type of season. And guess what? I'm going to do the same thing for you. And then he's going to go and talk to Ben Simmons and say, hey, Ben, I know you're close with LeBron James, right? You both were Clutch Sports. Well, I am the guy who coached LeBron James to a championship in Cleveland. And I see some of the same things that he did in open court that you can do in open court. And then right on down the line, to me, he'd be the clear-cut choice for the job. And, we'll see how this thing plays out. But I think it's a no-brainer. He should be the next head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers.
Also in the book, you guys talk about how he was holding LeBron accountable, and he was able to talk to Kyrie and LeBron in a way that a lot of others don't. By the way, Ty Lue is one of only 2 head coaches to win a championship with LeBron. All the times LeBron's been to the finals. It's just a little side note. But touch on a little bit about Ty Lue and his ability to communicate with people, because we know that LeBron has a history of only certain people he lets communicate with him like that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wrote about a scene in Game 7 of the NBA Finals where it's halftime, and I think it's a 6 or 8 point game, and LeBron had his numbers, but in front of the entire locker room, Ty called him out and said, "I need more from you." And LeBron was kind of indignant, and he went to his longtime teammate James Jones and said, like, "Is he really saying this?" And James, who is a voice that LeBron respects as well, said, I mean, listen to Ty. You respect him, right? You trust him, right? I mean, doesn't he know what he's talking about? Like, you could probably give us some more. And, LeBron stormed out of the locker room in a huff and ended up making the greatest play of his career 2 quarters later, on that block on Iguodala. And, it's about pushing the right buttons, and it's also about not always pushing those buttons. Philly fans know about a guy like Larry Boa. Like, you can't always be the guy, blowing off at the top. You gotta pick your spots, pick your moments, and the wealth of experience Ty Lue's had in his career, I think, allows him to be able to read the room and know when he needs to, bring a little extra fire.
Again, the book is Return to the King, LeBron James, the Cleveland Cavs, and the greatest comeback in NBA history. Co-author Dave McMenamin, along with Brian Windhorst. Dave joining us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Mick10 on Twitter. ESPN NBA reporter, and as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. Dave, I really appreciate the time and the flexibility to come on today.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and thanks for mentioning the book.
Absolutely. In the book, I've read it. It's really good. It's one of those books that, you may have an opinion of LeBron James and Ty Lue and all the characters involved in that saga of about 3-4 years over there in Cleveland. you're going to have a different opinion after you read the book. I can literally just guarantee, like I said, it's on sale on Amazon right now. So, why not? Get yourself some reading material as we're wrapping up the NBA season. Game night here on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0970. We'll get back to the Eagles conversation and take your thoughts on the hiring of Billy Donovan as the new Chicago Bulls head coach. The report yesterday was that he was going to be a finalist for the Sixers job. Well, now his name is off the board. So it looks like it's going to come down to, unless another name emerges, it's going to come down to Tyronn Lue versus Mike D'Antoni. Very interesting, completely opposites on the coaching spectrum. So interesting stuff there from Dave McMenamin. He thinks Tyronn Lue would be the right coach for the Sixers. He thinks that the Sixers should hire Tyronn Lue. What do you think? 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Phillies are currently leading 2-0 in their bullpen game against the Washington Nationals. We'll see if they can actually hold on to this lead, or they'll implode again like they did in the last game. Game night here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, tonight, 8:30 again, Lakers Nuggets right here on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow, Celtics Heat right here on 97.3 ESPN. Your home for Eagles football, the NBA playoffs, and more.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
And I think I just divided their attention too much. Chase two rabbits, catch none. That kind of stuff. We had very experienced players make uncharacteristic mistakes. Rodney talked about himself. Guys like Brandon Graham, who's one of the best backside run defenders I've ever been around. We got gashed on a couple runs because Brandon didn't close the way that he normally closes.
Jim Schwartz again blaming himself. He said, I divided the players' attention. He used the term chasing two rabbits, catching none. Listen, I'm not denying what he said, but I think it's curious how forceful he was in this presser about how this was on him. And that the execution issues, the mistakes, the misreading of the misdirections. You mentioned, Rodney McLeod and Brandon Graham, two players who, usually play a lot better than they did. He said, we have experienced players. They didn't play up to what they're capable of doing. He said, I got to do a better job of putting those guys in a position to be successful. And, this is the other part he said about Brandon Graham and his performance on Sunday.
The execution is defense coordinator. So, I make no bones about where I'm pointing the finger on this one, because it's my job to put them in those better positions. Obviously, having different players. I've mentioned Brandon Graham. Brandon is an outstanding backside run defender. But when he started worrying about the boot too much, we started getting gash in that run. It's my job to narrow his focus a little bit more.
So Schwartz was blaming himself a lot today for the mistakes of the team. Text board is open, 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board, 609-403-0973. Texter says, Josh, do you think is due to the lack of a defensive leader? For instance, there was Dawkins. After Dawkins, there was Jenkins, all vocal kind of get you fired up leaders. Who is that guy now? It's a good question, and it's a question that was asked to Jalen Mills today by the media, and Jalen was pretty forceful in his answer about it. He didn't like the question at all. He basically came out and said, he said, quote, as far as questions with Malcolm, that's my brother, with all due respect to him, but can we please stop doing that? We have enough leaders, unquote. So, Jalen's kind of taking the position that people got to stop asking about Jenkins, that they've moved on. They loved Malcolm. They won a Super Bowl with Malcolm. But in Jalen's mind, they have enough leaders. So at least in the players' minds, they don't think it's an issue of leadership. They think it's now Malcolm. If he was here, maybe he would be the rallying cry leader of the message, and maybe the perception on the outside is there's a leadership void. But let's remember, Mike Gill brought this up early on the Sports Bash. In the past years, we've had people working the Eagles beat for 97.3 in the locker rooms after every game. Scott Grayson, for example. For the last few years, he hasn't just covered the Eagles games week in and week out, publishing his Grayson reports. Scott has flown all over the world. Literally, he's going to London when the Eagles went to London. He's been in the locker rooms after the games. He's going to the Super Bowl with Mike and covered the Eagles in the Super Bowl and been in the locker room and covered this team and been around this organization day in and day out. He can't do that now. So we don't know what the vibe in the locker room is anymore. We don't know exactly who the rallying cry voice is. Because of these Zoom meetings, a lot of the interactions between the players and the media is a little bit more is a little bit more conventional, I should say. It's a little bit more structured, a little bit more neutral. It's a little bit more formal in many ways. Whereas when a reporter walks into a locker room, they can get a vibe. They can get the vibe of the team. They can measure the temperature in the locker room, as they call it. They can read the room. They can read the players, and they can see who's willing to talk to the media and who's not. And historically, one of the reasons why people believe Malcolm Jenkins was such a huge leader for this team was because, like Brian Dawkins previously, Malcolm was the guy who would bring all the media to him and says, all right, boys, come on and talk to me. He would be the guy who would open himself up to talking to the media to kind of shield some of the other players away from having to talk, or being willing to take the questions the other players don't want to answer, or being the guy who's going to kind of speak for the defense. So now that we don't have that locker room access, now because of COVID, that we're not allowed to have reporters in the locker room. There's limited access to the games in general. They limit the number of people who can even cover the games on game day and being even in the stadium. There's a lot less surety about what is going on in terms of leadership and what the mood is, the team and the environment. We have to take the coach's word for it. And when Rodney McLeod comes out, as Jim Schwartz mentioned, and says, we were prepared in the game plan for what we saw, we just didn't execute. Or when Jim Schwartz says, I divided their attention too much. Usually Brandon Graham is the guy making the play there, but because I cued him too hard on the bootleg, I took away something that was one of his strengths away from him. When you hear stuff like that, that's all you have to go off of. So I think that there's a little bit less of an issue when it comes to a defensive leader, not because I'm undervaluing what Malcolm brought to the table, but because there's not a right answer. We don't have enough information on that. And for Jalen Mills to react the way he did today when he was asked that question, that tells me that it's abundantly clear that the players feel like they have the situation, for lack of a better term, leadership-wise under control, and that the players themselves don't feel like it's a leadership issue. Again, I'm not saying that there isn't a leadership issue without Malcolm, but obviously we're a month removed now, and we've heard a lot of athletes talk about how the Zoom calls have forced them to maybe come out of their shells, maybe be more communicative, more assertive with their teammates. Maybe there is something to be said for Malcolm not being there, but I don't think Malcolm is the reason why, right? I think that, like Jim Schwartz said, there was an execution issue. I know Schwartz wants to take the bullets for this per se, but I think that we have to realize that if he claims that Brandon Graham didn't play well on a certain play because he has divided attention, or that he's, as Jim Schwartz mentions, chasing two rabbits and catching none. Yeah, but isn't it also on the player to make the right decision on the field? Jim Schwartz also said to the media today, coaches coach and players play. Well, it's on the players to also execute. And I think that if the players were told what was coming at them and they couldn't execute, it's not just on the coach to coach them upright and put them in a position to be successful. It's also on the players to absorb the information given to them by the coach. 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Follow-up text on that question says, who is the guy on the sidelines in the game that is that rallying cry? To be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know because of the media coverage and because of the way the games are being covered now, I think that we're getting less access than ever to the sidelines. There's a lot less cameras focused in and around the sidelines because you can't have as many people on the field. There's not NFL Films cameras following these guys around 24/7, pregame, middle of the game, post-game. We're not getting the access from the sideline reporters saying, hey, guys, I just overheard so-and-so saying on the sideline. We're not getting the access through the usual outlets, so I don't really know who that person is. I know that guys like Rodney McLeod and Jalen Mills are passionate players. I know that we've been told of situations where guys like Vinnie Curry and Brandon Graham have spoken up when there's been situations, but I can't guarantee you who exactly that person is on the sidelines because we don't have the access like we used to. And I think that is that's really something that is inhibiting our ability to properly analyze this football team at 0-2. Because, again, under normal circumstances, in a world that's not 2020, COVID-19 pandemic, etc., because of the restrictions that are placed on us, we don't really have all the answers like we usually do. We have to take the coaches and the players at their word more than ever. And if you take the coaches and the players at their word, well, maybe, and I say maybe, I'm not guaranteeing it, but maybe we have to actually believe them when they say, hey, guys, there's a situation here, and I'm telling you what the situation is. Josh Hennig, Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Again, we're going to remind you that coming up tonight, Lakers, Nuggets. This is a must-win for the Nuggets tonight. If the Nuggets can't win this game tonight, they're down 3-0. And it's not just because historically, when a team is down 3-0 in the NBA playoffs, they typically lose the series. It's also because of the fact that the Denver Nuggets had a game basically stolen from them in some ways on Tuesday because of the game-winning shot, because of the emotions of the game on Sunday night in Game 2. If they don't win this game tonight, you're pretty much saying that they can't win the series because they don't have what it takes to get one over on this team. And I got to tell you guys, I like the Nuggets, but I picked the Lakers to win the series. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers win tonight, but I expect the Nuggets to find a way tonight because I just think they're a good basketball team, and I think they'll figure it out. Murray and Jokic are phenomenal players. I can't see them getting swept. I think this series goes at least 6 games. Tune in tonight, 97.3 ESPN. Thanks again to Dave McMenamin, ESPN NBA reporter, for joining us here on Game Night. If you missed any of my conversation with Dave, it'll be up on 97.3ESPN.com tonight and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. I'm Josh Hennig. Catch you tomorrow.